All right, welcome back, guys. This week we have Jessica Blake with us. She is an LCS certified coach, but the reason I have her here today is because of her engineer mind. And we will talk about ways that she kind of addresses things a little bit differently and tools that she has because of the way she thinks that I think will be helpful for all of us. But Jessica, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Jessica Blake, and I am an LCS certified coach. I'm also a Gallup Global Strengths Coach, so the Strengths Finders, which is fun.
Interesting.
But most of my adult professional life I've spent in more technical roles. So I have an engineering undergrad and engineering master's, and then I've worked in manufacturing and construction for many years. And then in 2018, I launched my own consulting business. So we do continuous improvement and lean. There's some certifications that I help companies with, and we also do some other miscellaneous project management type stuff. So that's me. We're a team of 4 right now, and we've been in business about 6 years.
Very good. And what is your ADHD story?
Ooh, so this plays into, owning my own small business. When I was 35, so 2 years ago, I was starting to realize that I was having memory issues. And so I would be talking to someone, I would, look over and then come back and they'd be like, "So what do you think?" And I'd be like, I lost the thread. Like, it's like it was in my hand and it just dropped. And I have no idea what they're talking about. So I realized, like, hey, my brain is really struggling to keep up, and it keeps erroring, right? So I talked to my doctor and got evaluated, and ADHD was the best fit for that. So I was having memory issues. And then once I started learning about ADHD, I was like, oh, like a lot of this stuff, I've masked, and I've come up with strategies throughout my life that have supported it and helped it. But I reached the ceiling of what my current capacity could handle, and my brain just wasn't able to keep up with all of the stuff. I've got 2 little kids and a business and, coaching certification. I think that was around the same time. And so it just, everything together, I was no longer capable of fully managing that without additional resources. And I feel like, we'll talk about productivity, but I feel like in your life, right, you go from, you're a middle school student, then you go to high school and things get harder. And then you go to college maybe and things get harder. And then you work and things are just, they get harder. And a lot of times we're not taught the skills to help us cope with that. How to manage our workloads, how to manage our brains. That's a great example. Until we reach that plateau and that peak of wherever it is that our brains kind of are at capacity, and then we struggle. And so for me, that was 35, but I do a lot of coaching, and I like to prep people ahead of time. So if they're in college and they're about to start working, like, hey, it's going to get a lot harder, and it's great if you could practice some of these skills now until it gets to the point where you can't manage your own work.
How wonderful is that? Yeah.
So that's my story. Probably typical to a lot of people. I, had anxiety and perfectionism as a child all the way through. And as I'm learning, like, that, those are very ADHD woman type symptoms. So it all kind of makes sense. And I find it really empowering and positive that I have this diagnosis now, that my failures are not moral flaws, that they are a function of my brain, and I can work with my brain and not, it up for not performing how I want it to. So it's been very positive in my life to be diagnosed with ADHD and learn those tools.
Yeah. And you described something that kind of touched something in me. Like when I was 18 and 19, maybe I wasn't following through in college the way I would have liked to. And I didn't really know at that time I had ADHD. But when I was like 20 something and I was substitute teaching, that is when I realized I had ADHD. But I thought, you're out of high school, you're pretty much done with college. What does it matter? It's no big deal. But that capacity that you're talking about, I was like, okay, when I realized this, I didn't even have children. And then once I had children and I was like trying to manage myself and a home and all my interests and my hobbies and, my relationships and all of that, that is when I like kind of hit this ceiling. And anxiety and overwhelm took over and were just kind of my go-to emotions all the time. So that was really interesting that like I never thought about it that way of it being like a capacity issue. So thank you for sharing that. But as I mentioned before, your engineer mind, when we were talking ahead of time, you mentioned a lot of really interesting like tools and tactics that you have that I think are very unique to the way that you think. So would you mind sharing those with us?
So I do a lot of support with companies and manufacturers, nonprofits and agencies, all kinds of people. So this can apply to lots of different things, but I love applying these tools to my life. So I'm taking these established tools that have been around for 100 years, maybe more, right, before somebody named them. And I'm applying those to my life and other people's lives, right? And it is so powerful. Like we don't need to start from scratch. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are tools and techniques out there that can help us. So I wanted to share a few of them. And I think a good example would be, let's go with my daughter. I got a letter in the mail that my daughter was late to pre-K like 15 times in like one semester. And I was like mortified, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm failing as a mother, as a parent. So instead of just beating myself up and saying, we need to do better, we need to try harder, right? I have, time blindness and, other ADHD things. And instead of just berating myself like maybe I would have done in the past, I decided to do a root cause and corrective action on this. So this is a tool we use in manufacturing and lean. And I used a tool called fishbone diagram, which is one of the kind of more technical tools you can use. But basically you draw a fishbone and you draw your problem as the head of the fish, and then the bones of the fish are all the contributing factors to that problem. And so kid was late to pre-K, right? That's the result. But there's dozens of factors that go into that. So, she eats breakfast while watching TV. So she's super slow in the mornings. We're not getting her to bed in time. So she's tired in the mornings and cranky, pre-Kers. And then, of course, she doesn't want to put her pants on and, how that goes. Me and my husband were going to bed too late. So we didn't want to get up, and we weren't, getting up early and getting her up and, getting everybody ready. Like we were rushing in the mornings as well. And then one interesting factor that came up was it's always a problem with her socks. We can never find socks. She doesn't like the socks we have, right? And of course, when kids are cranky and tired, those things are huge. Otherwise, she can normally handle it. So that was a really low-hanging fruit. Like we want to rank those ideas. So all those influencing factors, we want to rank by effort and impact. So it's kind of like the Pareto concept where 20% of the solutions are going to give you 80% of the value. So we decided buying new socks was a really low hanging fruit. Let's try it, right? So we bought new socks, seam-free socks, so she couldn't throw a fit about it. And that was great. We also realized that us grown-ups needed to go to bed earlier so that we could get her to bed earlier so that we could all get up and have breakfast together. So those two things. So the going to bed earlier was more of a kind of process change. It took more effort, but it had a huge impact. So between those two solutions, we had no more lates for the rest of the year. Did not get any more letters, which was great. So if we had just stopped at we need to try harder, it would have just been kind of pushing uphill, right? And instead we really evaluated what the problems were and the influencing factors and found some solutions that were helpful. And I literally drew this out on the board. My husband rolled his eyes every time he walked by it, but I was like, no, I'm doing this. I'm using my tools.
I love that.
And it just
I love that.
So down and really think about it.
Something so interesting that just happened this week that I can kind of relate to with this is as of this recording, we're running a 12-week challenge, and the people that are joining it are bringing any kind of goal that they want. Well, what I noticed this week is part of that for me is like filling out a habit tracker. And I didn't have a great week. I had like a score of 66%. And we Jessica noticed my 12-week year book before we started. And in there, they have you score yourself. And what I'm noticing from a mindset piece was, okay, I got 66%. What's going on here? And I looked and I'm like, okay, you're not meal planning. And therefore, if you're not planning your meals, you're not honoring your plan because there's no plan to honor. So you're losing, 2 points right there every single day. But I just saw it as like data. Okay. Instead of beating myself up over like a 66% score, I'm like, this is the information. This is the data that this gives me. And here's how I can do better. But that school, when they sent you that letter 15 times, they were offering you data like
Wow.
15 times out of the semester. And you took that data and you went, okay, I can choose to be, failing as a mother, or I can choose to take this data and make an improvement. And so
And I
I
could
love
have
that.
chosen to do thought work around like, you know what, it's not that important. And it pre-K on time, who cares? I mean, there's social impacts, but you have to really decide, is this problem something I want to coach myself to realize it's not a problem, which in some situations is really helpful, right?
Mhm.
And then sometimes you actually want to solve it. So yeah,
Very
I
good.
like that example of looking at the
Yeah.
data. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you had some other tools. One of them was around energy levels.
Yeah. So I love reading. I don't know if you can see all my right. All
Bye
my
bye.
books. I have them in beautiful color order, so they make my brain happy. I love reading. I love distilling knowledge for my clients, for myself, for my customers, everybody. So one of the books I read is called At Your Best, and I don't remember the guy's name that wrote it. But it talks about energy levels and green zone, yellow zone, red zone for your day. And so it has you start by tracking that, just jotting down on a little piece of paper, like time of day and how you feel, and just kind of getting some data again. And then using that data to plan your weeks or your days going forward. So green zone times are times when you have the most energy for your day, you can focus, you're distraction free, or you need to make it distraction free. Yellow zone times are like, I can kind of do some mediocre stuff. And then red zones, that's like your 3:30 p.m. You're at the end of the day and it's,
Mhm.
you're done with the day and you're just like, I'm just going to delete emails, right? So planning very consciously and just strategically knowing that it's not a moral failing, it's not a flaw, but working with that. So what can I do in my green zone times that will add the most value? What do I need my most capacity for? That's usually things like composing a difficult email or writing or doing a lot of thinking or planning, things that really take your full self and your full brain. Plan those things for your green zone. For most people,
Yeah.
that's like 8 to 10 a.m. I think is the guidance they give in the book. And has been pretty true for me. But some people, it might be 11 p.m., right? Us night owls that like to stay up. Maybe that's our go time. So being very conscious and strategic about protecting that green zone time. Some companies that implement this don't have meetings from 8 to 10 a.m. every day. You come into work and you get started immediately on the important things for the day. And then the rest of the day, as your energy levels wane, you can do meetings and other things that don't take quite all of your brain, don't take as much
Yeah.
creative thought. So it's been really helpful for me. I know you Mandy, tell us a little bit about how you implement that with your clients. I know you've talked about that
Yeah.
some.
We're always working with energy levels and for various reasons, for sleep issues or for there's lots of reasons that we're working around energy levels. I do have a little story that about my energy levels. I was trying to work on a logo. I just got started with my business, you guys. I started imperfectly. My website still sucks. It's there.
Good. I love it.
Um, but there was something where they were saying like have a logo, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a logo. And I was creating the ADHD Academy, and I'm like, I need a logo for that. And so I was sitting there trying to do a logo, and I think it was like 6 o'clock at night. Not super late. This shouldn't be too much of a problem, but I was struggling, and my husband was kind of sitting over across the room. And I'm like, I just can't get this. And I was working on it for like an hour and a half and didn't like anything. It was terrible. And he's like, why don't you just go to sleep? Why don't you just save that for tomorrow? And for once I listened. I was like,
Right.
okay, but I must have like went at this for hours. And the next morning, I think I woke up. I think I'm mistaken. I think it was like kind of late at night. And I woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and I just went right over to my computer and I designed two logos in 15 minutes. And you can see like the difference with our brain capacity and the energy levels of like that night I was just done and wouldn't accept it until I listened to my husband's advice on that. And in the morning, I was just so much more clear and it was just easy. And so I love that about the different zones and paying attention to that. I can definitely see that throughout my day. I hit about 2 o'clock and I'm just finished. There's not going to be, and it's interesting that my work day goes from about 7 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Business
With
owners, we can do that, which is great. We can work with
exactly.
our brain.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do like a 9 to 5 or anything like that. Of course, I have, another business, but I'm just kind of managing that. And I say that from like a distance, managing that, like just doing orders and just making sure things are taken care of and things like that. So that doesn't take a lot of my brain power. Um, so yeah, what's the next direction you'd like to go with this?
Well, two more things to add to this kind of energy level. So, one
Very
of the
good.
things that as a business owner, I work from home. I have full flexibility. Obviously, I've got clients and things that have hours, but I take a nap almost every day. So, I take a nap around between 2 and 3. I try not to do it too late or it'll keep me up, but that can recharge my energy levels because I was realizing I was using all of my energy all day long and I was just like powering through and I was exhausted at like 4:30 and then my kids came home and they were getting the worst of me. And I realized that I did not want to be like lazy and not lazy, that's a very loaded word, right? But like sitting on the couch, low energy. Oh, I don't really want to go out and play because I had used up all my energy during the day. So I knew as a parent that I wanted to save some of that for them. And so I very consciously and strategically plan a nap in so that I can take a nap. I can also wake up and get back, it takes a little while to get back up to speed. But when they get home, I can be present. We can go do fun things in the evening. And it really has changed my relationship with the kids and the time of day. They're getting the best of me, even though I just worked a full day. So give yourself permission to try things, right? I think culture and society tells us we have to, you're going to run a business, you need to be at your desk from 8 to 5 and you need to, whatever, like throw it all away, like do what
My
works for
ADHD
you.
brain is like, no, no,
I know,
absolutely
rebellious.
not.
But I think we still have those lingering thoughts and those lingering guilt and shame and all of that. Like it's kind of embarrassing. I have to like coach myself around the fact that I schedule a nap every day. And I put it rest and restore time on my calendar and I make it private so nobody can see it. But,
I love
I
that.
had to change my thoughts around what it means to take a nap because I had lots of cultural thoughts in my brain about that was something lazy people do. And, that's not a real business owner and all of that. So I have coached myself a lot around that and it has been super helpful. It has made my life better by implementing that kind of change. Yeah.
You
So
know,
go ahead.
I've talked about it before, but Jessica put together this wonderful group of coaches that are able to offer coaching and then get coaching. And it's called Coach It Forward, right? And I remember you talking about this in a coaching call
Yeah.
about the nap.
Was I getting
Yeah,
coached around my thoughts around napping?
exactly. I remember that. So what a coincidence that
Yeah.
like full circle, here we are. And
Uh-huh.
you're like, I'm good with it. It's
Good.
fine.
Yeah. 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 The
So
other thing I'll add
that's
about
awesome.
this like green zone, red zone is that because I am a business owner, I can go to my kids' Easter parties and things like that at school. Sometimes we don't get the kids to daycare in school and I don't get started until 10 a.m. Because of that flexibility, I often save some like really easy kind of menial tasks. Like I need to format this document or whatever. I'll save that for the evenings. Kids go to bed. I can put on a show. My husband and I can watch it and I can just like tootle around and do those like low energy tasks. I very strategically save some of those for that like evening time where I can, spend another half hour, an hour, and I can finish something, but it doesn't take a whole lot of energy from me. So being very strategic, it doesn't have to be during your workday. That can, the weekends and wherever it is that you can get the most value with the energy levels you have at that time. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing that because sometimes I do work on Saturday.
Mhm.
And it's just like little things that I wasn't able to get to during the week. And I think there's a little bit of guilt around that right now. And so what I hear you saying
Guilt
is,
around working or guilt around not finishing?
yeah, like I should be able to get it done during the workday, I think is the thought around that. And what I hear you saying is like we can give ourselves permission to do these things whenever we want to. And let's save the brain dead type things for when we don't need a lot of thinking power. So
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
maybe what I'm hearing when you say you work on the weekends is you're using your green zone time for something that's kind of strategic, or and maybe you're doing little menial stuff, but you're saving, you're capitalizing on that super great mental capacity and applying that to your business, which is cool.
And the time that I'm
Instead of
working
doing
on Saturday,
laundry. Yeah.
exactly. The time I'm working on Saturdays is probably like during the green zone, actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So if
that's
you
very
can
cool.
swap, do laundry at 4 p.m. on a Thursday and then save an hour of your green zone time on a Saturday, I think that's a great swap. So you
Yeah,
have to
and
balance it with family and all of that, but it can work.
what's interesting is like with things like that, like laundry, it doesn't take any brain power. At least now it doesn't. There was once upon a time that it did. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when I was like younger, like a younger mother, basically, I didn't have like a certain way I folded things. And that really hurt my brain. Like it was like there wasn't just one way I folded t-shirts or anything like that. But the reason I'm even talking about this is I don't make laundry like a thing. It's something like I squeeze in, like I put a load of laundry in. That takes, a few minutes. I switch it at some point in the day. That takes a few minutes. I fold it right out of the dryer. That takes a few minutes. It's not like a thing. But then I know some of my clients are like, I need a laundry day, or I need to focus on it, or it doesn't happen. But for me, I wonder like what other types of things, or are you guys listening? What other types of things do you just not really make like a big priority in your life? Like I just don't let laundry. I was scooping the cat box one time. This is so gross. But I was scooping the cat box and I remember like my husband was like in the like pantry area where it is. And I'm like, this is not my best life. Like, so
I got an
we got,
automatic cat box. Did you
we
get one
did,
too?
we got what is it called? A litter robot or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And now it's the kid's job to like take care of that and
Oh,
all of that. Like,
that's
what in
awesome.
your life can you just like minimize so much that it's just not a thing?
Yeah, I mean, and that plays into lean and continuous improvement, right? You're spending your
Mhm.
time, it's taking you however many minutes and mental energy every day to do it. What could you eliminate? What could you engineer out, right? Somebody engineered a
Mm, love that.
solution that saves so much time. I have a cheaper version of that one, but it scoops, and once a week I can go through and dump it out, right? That brings up another idea that I'm sure your clients, are aware of, but pairing fun things with not so fun things. So if I have to sort
Yeah.
the laundry, I'm going to put on a fun podcast, or I'm going to watch my favorite show, or I'm going to, do something I like so that I can pair it with something that isn't as much fun, but I can kind of look forward to. At 4 o'clock, I'm going to stop working and I'm going to go do laundry and I can listen to a fun podcast, right? I'm saving that
Yeah.
red zone time. Doesn't take a lot of mental energy. So pairing that, and I know that's a book and a strategy, and I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, what is it? Tiny Habits or
Atomic Habits? Is
it's one
that
of
one of
those
them?
Atomic
Okay,
Habits.
one of
Yeah.
those.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
They all come into my brain and get mixed up. So,
And what's so funny is like we don't realize the stuff that we just do naturally. Like when you say that, I'm like, oh, there is no folding laundry without a book or a podcast.
oh
That does
no.
not happen. If there's no book or no podcast, if there's no entertainment, there's no folding laundry.
Yeah, I think so. This is kind of funny. Maybe you or some of your people can identify with it. Like showering is an issue for me. I don't know if it's a sensory thing. I
It's an
think it's
issue with
like
a lot of my clients.
15 minutes that I have no stimulation and no brain stuff. So I will listen to a podcast or a book on tape or some really fun music, and that helps me take showers because otherwise I just dread them.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to point out to my sister, um, talks about like hating doing dishes. And she realized that she didn't like her hands being wet. The sensory, weirdness of wet hands and yucky. So she just got herself a pair of gloves and she puts on music and a podcast or whatever. She's always wearing her headphones and she will do dishes and doesn't mind it a bit. So when we think about I'm dreading this thing, do that root cause analysis. Think about what it is that I'm really what bothers me, and give yourself grace that it's not a moral failing, right?
Mm,
It's just something we need to figure out. And so what is it about it that is a problem, and what creative solutions can you come up with that will help with that? So that's
exactly. Exactly. It sparked my mind when you said 15 minutes for the shower. Like, I want people to understand, like, I think all of us have our 15-minute dread kind of activity. I had a neck injury and I still, I found a different way to do these exercises so I don't have to do this dreaded one, to Jessica's point. But the dreaded exercise was I had to lay on a neck block for 15 minutes. And
cool.
as a hyperactive ADHDer, to lay down on the ground on a neck block for 15 minutes, even if I was listening to a book or a podcast, was just torture. Like, I
Not enough.
couldn't do it. I'm okay if I'm doing something. If you're showering, you're doing things, right? Or doing dishes or whatever, but just to lay there and do nothing, which I also work with my clients a lot about, like, dealing with the discomfort of doing nothing. But there's that work to be done too. But that is a real thing. And I just want you guys to know, if you're like dreading like 10 to 15-minute activities and you think something's wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, it is very normal. It's very common. I would even go so far as to say all of us have these activities, and Jessica's giving us very good tools as far as working around them. So thank you for that.
Be creative, right? Come up with, like, step back and think, okay, this is a problem. How could I solve this problem? And be really creative. Maybe ask friends, ask, your spouse, whoever, just to help you brainstorm some solutions to it, because you don't have to do it any certain way. That's what's beautiful about our lives, right?
Absolutely.
Do whatever you want.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another thing that I wanted to bring up, and another reason I wanted to bring Jessica on, was chronic pain. I notice there's a lot of my clients and a lot of you out there tell me you are dealing with chronic pain. And Jessica's been doing some interesting things, learning some interesting things about this. Do you want to share kind of your story around chronic pain and what you're doing about it?
Yeah. So I will kind of start with my story. So I've had neck pain and headaches, shoulder tension, that kind of thing, since probably college. Probably started with poor posture and, studying and looking down at a book all day. Um, and it just has gotten worse, and it's gotten worse. Hindsight, I've realized it's gotten worse during really stressful times in my life. And I never really made that connection. So I was recommended an app called Curable. So it's like $5 a month. It's not crazy expensive. They do have like a $300 group program and a $2,000 thing that you can, but I've gotten an enormous amount of value out of just like the $5 app. But basically it introduces you to the concept of neuroplastic pain. So neuroplastic pain means that if you have something that's like an acute pain, you sprain your ankle, your brain recognizes it as pain, but then once that injury heals, no more pain, right?
Mm,
Chronic pain comes in when the brain kind of takes that acute pain and it latches onto it, and it just keeps giving the signal inflammation, pain, inflammation, pain. And it's a physical response. It's not just that pain is all in your brain. But if you think about the example of, let's say you're like got a broken ankle and you're running from a lion, right? You can
mm,
bet you will be able to get up and run from a lion, and you will probably not feel much, if any, pain until you're safe. And then your brain will be like, oh my gosh, pain, right? It will flood
interesting.
your
Yeah.
brain. That will be the worst pain in your life. But that just kind of shows the example of how our brains can turn on and off pain. It's kind of like it can regulate it. You think about people with like phantom limb syndrome. They have itching and pain from a limb that's not there, because all pain comes from the brain,
Yeah.
even if it's in response to something acute or some inflammation or some signal. It's
Mhm.
created in the brain. And so with chronic pain, that alarm system gets stuck on the on button, and it just says pain, 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 pain all the time. So it can start interpreting these normal signals of pressure and tension as pain. And it basically just starts doubling down, and it just starts, the more pain you have, the more pain you feel. And it's this like vicious cycle. And it's very much related to, mindset and coaching. So it plays into that really nicely. It fits into that model really well. So this Curable app walks you through all of these brain training exercises, meditations, writing exercises, a lot of things that can help you program your response to pain. So there's like visualizations and somatic tracking, which is where it's one of my favorite exercises, where you don't do it when you're in extreme pain, but when you're in a moderate amount of pain or a mild, you can lay down and you can pay really close attention to what it feels like, and you be curious. And the very first time I did this exercise, it was so interesting that when I was having pain, let's say here, and I was just being curious and I let it happen, and it's very like meditation based thing, and the pain moved. It moved to a different place. And it was like, wow, like that was so validating that it was neuroplastic pain. And I was like, okay, this method is amazing. The other piece of information that I thought was really helpful is that with back pain, a lot of people have back pain, right? They've done studies. There's a book called The Way Out that's connected. I don't know how it's connected, but to the Curable creators. One of the people wrote this book and did these studies, and he's a doctor, and he did these back pain studies, and he brought people in with back pain and without back pain to an MRI, and they looked at the physical manifestations, like what's going on with your physical structure that can be causing pain. And about half the people that should have pain didn't, and about half the people shouldn't have pain did. And so there's not a lot of correlation between pain and the physical structures, right? Like bone spurs and disc degeneration and all of that we hear about, like this is a physical problem. It doesn't correlate with the amount of pain we have, which is really interesting. So they put in solutions like, let's go have surgery. And then most of the time surgery doesn't. And so your brain still has the pain if it doesn't have the physical thing anymore. So this whole program is about changing your mind and changing your brain. And it has, I've seen it work. You just knowing that it is your brain can help. And it's not that it doesn't exist, right? It's not that it's fake or that it's all in your head. It's real. Pain is real. But hearing stories about other people who have relieved their pain can be helpful for your brain to relieve its own pain. So it's fascinating. There's an app, there's a podcast where they interview recovery stories, and just listening to those can trigger your brain into some relief, which is incredible. Our brains are so powerful. So it's all based on neuroscience. There's a lot of research. Most doctors aren't yet familiar with neuroplastic pain, so they won't know that term, but that, it's starting to become more popular, more common in normal medical circles. So
fascinating. And you said something interesting, like all in your head. I remember due to my ADHD, I was dealing with a lot of like anxiety and depression. And I remember people saying things like, it's all in your head. And I'm like, yeah, it's in my head. And it's kind of the same with pain, right? Like, it's all in your head. Well, yeah. So I have a hip that I will often have a lot of pain with. It's been better since I found some exercises to help with it. But there was a good 2-3 years of just constant everyday pain and just, shooting down my leg, and just, it would affect like the whole right side of my body. And it was just an everyday occurrence, and not as bad as those of you that deal with like migraines and things like that. I can't even imagine. I hear the descriptions and I'm like, that's got to be hard, but it's not that bad, but it was just constant pain. And I wish I had known then, like did you call it somatic?
Somatic tracking was the exercise. Neuroplastic pain was the kind of concept.
The somatic tracking is what was super interesting to me, that pain moved for you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So that whole concept, I think, is revolutionary and can be really helpful. The other thing I'll add is that I've had chronic fatigue. I had chronic mono in high school, and I had chronic fatigue all the way through my young 20s, early 20s, and it's mostly resolved now. But a lot of people that have chronic fatigue, it turns into chronic pain. So there's a huge correlation there. There's a huge correlation between early child traumatic events, adverse events in people's lives, and even like the age of a traumatic event can impact the likelihood of chronic pain later on. So there's a huge correlation, and it's our brains trying to keep us safe, right? Like, we've had this traumatic event. And our brain is like, we want to stay home and not let you go out to be in danger in the world. And so it's
Yeah.
like, it's this like trying to keep you safe and isolated and just protected in your bubble. Like when I get pain, I want to go lay down in the dark and I want to sleep and, that kind of thing. So
Well,
it's
and
so
with the traumatic events, it also makes me think like it gives you something else to focus on besides the traumatic event. And so it's like, no, look over here.
yeah. And the Curable app goes into a lot of that. So they have these exercises where you're kind of processing some of that. You're identifying the places, the times in your life where you've had more pain, and then it has you kind of think, okay, what was going on in the rest of your life at that time? And that was really interesting for me when I had my most painful episodes, years of episodes. Those were times when I was in a really high stress job, when I was in college, right? When I'm running my own business. So they were these kind of key times in my life that I could point to where the pain really correlated with the amount of anxiety and stress and all of that I was experiencing too.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, is there anything else that you think the audience should know?
I would say just to kind of wrap it up, um, take these tools that we've talked about, right? The root cause and corrective action and fishbone. And one of my favorites is David Allen's Getting Things Done, right? He has a whole series of tools about capturing all the ideas. Take it and iterate. Don't stop there. Take it and make it best for you. So if you're not updating something, if you're not making changes to it, maybe once a week, it probably isn't working great for you and you're going to abandon it. So I've ended up on this where I am right now, and it might be different, and I'm okay with that, right? I have my today board, and I actually call it next 2 days, so I don't feel too much pressure. But it's my now board, right? And then I have a bigger board behind me that's my longer term projects, things I need to capture. I don't want them all loose in my head, right? Because our brains are terrible at remembering things, especially mine. But I can capture it and I can throw it on that project board or that long term board. So that's the system that works for me currently. I have tried lots of different things, and I wouldn't say they've been failures. They've just taught me more about what it is that works for me. I need to see things visually, or I'll forget them because of my ADHD. So I have these 7 sticky notes in front of me, and these are the things I need to do here in the next few days. And the rest of it can stay out of my sight and out of my brain. So take what works,
so
iterate
important.
on it. It's so important to be creative and give yourself that grace to know that just because it works for somebody else doesn't mean I hate buying planners because they're something that works for somebody else. I like to have a template and then I can edit it and then I can change things around and I need to capture my hours and I need to have a waiting on section so that I know the things I've sent out into the world. So just be creative, give yourself permission, like brainstorm with a friend, brainstorm with a coach. That can be something that a coach can give you some new ideas and challenge those kind of sticking places. It's great to work with someone to work together on that. Don't be alone in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wrote down, I noted here changes. And it's so interesting because I showed Jessica my planner and I've showed you guys, if you look at previous episodes, I've showed you my now, not now tool that I put together with my Google Calendar because I work with you guys with appointments and things like that. And I do like Jessica, I only do like she does the first, the next, what did you call it? The next few days?
Next few days. Yeah.
Next few days. I do basically, it turns into the next few days, but I do like what's important today, what's important tomorrow. And today gets highlighted in one color and tomorrow gets highlighted in another. And then there's some things on this list that don't get highlighted at all. And it's why, because it matters, but nobody's going to die and nothing's going to catch fire if it doesn't happen. And then I plug those things into my calendar. But at the same time, I have like a month view sitting here in front of me. On this month view, it says record Jessica Blake podcast, like things like that, that I want to remember and keep front of mind. But this is like an iteration. That's kind of my whole point with the changes. If you look back at the video I did 2 years ago about time management, when I was first learning to manage my time, it's very rigid. It's not very ADHD friendly, although I thought it was at the time, and I like that you're giving permission for people to change because oftentimes I'm working with clients that are looking for a system and they want that system to be the place they land. And I don't think we ever land anywhere. And Jessica's point here is like, you shouldn't land. Don't even try. It's just a
You're
resting
landing, you're
point.
stagnant and you're not growing and you're not learning and you're not stretching yourself, right? You
Yeah,
want to
love
be
that.
continuously improving.
Love that. Okay. So Jessica is a multiple business owner, like most of us listening. And I know you have your engineering business, but where else can people find you? If they're interested in your productivity information, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I do have a couple of openings for productivity consulting or coaching. Sometimes it's just jumping on the phone and giving some ideas to somebody, and they can take it and run with it. Right? I don't have a 6-month package or anything that I sell, but I'm happy to figure out together. Right? Continuously improve, figure out what it is that that person needs, and be able to offer that. So I have a website, jessicaBlakeCoaching.com. You can also find that same profile on Facebook, and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I do a lot of I do free webinars on continuous improvement and some other fun stuff. So even
Love
though
that. I'll
it
have
may
to
not
check that out.
apply, I do lots of fun stuff. So
Very
yeah,
good.
find me, connect with me. I'd love to meet you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Jessica. We appreciate all the information you shared with us.
All right. Thank you, Mande.
Thank you.